On December 24th, 1987, in a stone cathedral older than the country that surrounded it, 3 loud knocks echoed through the nave during midnight mass. They did not come from the doors. They did not come from the walls. They came from beneath the altar. What happened in the hours that followed would be recorded in church archives, whispered about by clergy for decades, and officially labeled as a tragic disappearance. But among those who were present that night, there was another word used in private: oppression. According to diocesan records from northern Spain, Bishop Ignacio Alvarez had served the Archdiocese of San Telmo for nearly 18 years. He was not known for superstition. He was a scholar, a canon lawyer, and a calm administrator who often discouraged dramatic interpretations of unusual events.
He's coming closer.
Priests who worked under him described him as steady, disciplined, and deeply rational. That is why what happened inside the Cathedral of Santa Lucia on Christmas Eve remains so difficult to explain. The cathedral stood at the edge of a small coastal city, its foundations laid in the early 1500s.
Ascend now, and bear
Beneath
witness.
it were older structures, Roman stone,
Father, forgive me,
fragments
for I
of
have
Visigothic
sinned.
burial vaults, and
darkness
narrow
consumes
crypts
me.
sealed long ago.
I cannot bear it.
Renovations in the 1970s had uncovered several bricked corridors beneath the sanctuary. Most were resealed without investigation. Bishop Alvarez had approved those renovations personally. In early December of 1987, weeks before the incident, subtle changes were first noted. The sacristan, a man named Mateo Ruiz, later stated that the bishop had begun spending extended periods alone in the cathedral after evening services.
Reveals the truth.
At first, this was not unusual. Advent was a busy season. Preparation for midnight mass required attention to detail. But Ruiz noticed something unsettling. Several times, he entered the sanctuary to find the bishop standing motionless before the high altar, not praying, not reading, simply listening. When Ruiz asked if everything was all right, the bishop reportedly answered, "The building breathes differently at night." Ruiz assumed it was a metaphor. Then came the reports of knocking. On December 12th, after a late rehearsal with the choir, 2 altar servers claimed they heard 3 knocks beneath the sanctuary floor. They believed it was plumbing. The heating system had old pipes. The sound was dismissed. On December 17th, during a quiet weekday mass, a similar sound was heard again. This time, several parishioners turned their heads toward the altar at once. The bishop paused mid-sentence, waiting. The noise did not repeat. After the service, he instructed the maintenance staff to inspect the substructure. They found nothing. No loose stone. No burst pipes. No animals trapped in the crypt. Yet the bishop did not seem reassured. According to notes later discovered in his private study, Bishop Alvarez had begun reviewing old architectural diagrams of the cathedral. In the margins of one yellowed blueprint, he had written a single phrase in Latin: pulsatio ab infra. A knocking from below. On December 21st, he requested access to diocesan archives rarely opened. Among them were records from 1624 describing the temporary closure of the cathedral following what was termed disturbances during sacred rites. The documentation was fragmented. Pages were missing. But one surviving letter from a priest named Father Esteban de Vargas described repeated percussive sounds from beneath the altar during the vigil of the Nativity. The bishop did not share this discovery publicly. Instead, he summoned Father Tomas Herrera, a younger priest known quietly within the region for assisting in spiritual cases that did not have medical explanations. Father Herrera was not formally titled an exorcist, but he had trained in Rome and was discreetly consulted when parish priests encountered disturbing phenomena. Herrera arrived on December 23rd. He later testified that Bishop Alvarez appeared exhausted, his complexion pale. During their private meeting in the bishop's office, Alvarez reportedly said, "There are patterns in this place. They repeat, and they do not belong to us." Herrera asked if he believed the cathedral was haunted. The bishop shook his head.
No.
Not haunted. Claimed. They agreed to remain vigilant during midnight mass. Christmas Eve arrived cold and windless. By 11:30 p.m., the cathedral was filled beyond capacity. Families packed the pews. Candles flickered along the side chapels. The choir gathered in the loft, rehearsing softly. It was a night of expectation, warmth, and celebration. At precisely midnight, the bells rang. Bishop Alvarez began the Mass with a steady voice. Witnesses later described nothing unusual in his demeanor. He read the liturgy clearly. He moved with practiced reverence. The congregation responded in unison. The first knock came during the Gloria. It was deep and resonant. Not sharp like wood. Not hollow like pipe. Stone against stone. Several parishioners glanced around. The bishop paused, but only briefly. The choir faltered for half a beat before continuing. Then came the second knock. Louder. Closer. A tremor passed through the sanctuary floor. Candles along the altar rail flickered violently, though no wind entered the building. This time, the bishop stopped completely. Silence expanded across the cathedral. Hundreds of eyes turned toward him, and then the third knock struck. It seemed to come from directly beneath the altar table. A heavy impact. The marble slab vibrated. According to multiple witness statements collected later by diocesan investigators, Bishop Alvarez's expression changed in that moment. Not fear, not confusion, recognition. He slowly lowered the missile. Father Herrera, seated near the front, stood immediately. He later claimed he felt an intense pressure in his ears, as if descending rapidly in altitude. Several parishioners reported nausea. The bishop spoke into the silence. In nomine Patris, et Filii, et Spiritus Sancti.
Now and bear
his voice
witness.
did not echo as expected.
Father,
Instead,
forgive me, for
it
I
seemed
have sinned.
swallowed by the space.
But darkness consumes
Then,
me.
beneath the
I
altar,
cannot
something
bear it.
shifted. A grinding noise. Stone scraping against stone. The marble platform supporting the altar trembled again. A visible crack split across the front edge, thin but spreading. Gasps rippled through the congregation. Father Herrera moved toward the sanctuary steps. The bishop raised a hand, signaling him to stop. According to Herrera's later written account,
These words
Bishop
hold the
Alvarez
key.
whispered, "It is
The
not
flame
finished."
reveals the truth.
The floor beneath the altar suddenly dropped by several inches with a dull, heavy thud. Not collapsing entirely, but settling, as though something below had shifted weight. A child began crying in the third pew. The bishop stepped closer to the altar. Witnesses described the air as thick, oppressive. Several people near the front claimed they smelled damp earth, like a freshly opened grave. The bishop placed both hands flat on the altar surface. And then, without warning, every candle in the sanctuary extinguished at once. Darkness swallowed the altar area, leaving only the dim glow from the distant nave lamps. Panic began to stir in the congregation. People stood. Some moved toward the exits. Father Herrera reached the steps again, calling out to remain calm. In the dim light, those closest to the sanctuary swore they saw movement beneath the bishop's feet. Not visible figures, but subtle distortions in the stone, like something pressing upward from below. The bishop began to pray loudly in Latin, his voice firm, deliberate. As he spoke, a low knocking resumed, not 3 times, but continuous, rhythmic, deliberate. With each impact, the crack in the altar widened, and then the marble slab split completely down the center. The sound was violent, echoing through the cathedral. The congregation screamed. In the chaos, Father Herrera reached the sanctuary platform. He would later testify that the bishop turned toward him at that moment with an expression of calm resignation. He said to me, Herrera wrote, "It has waited long enough." Before Herrera could respond, the stone beneath the bishop's feet gave way. Not explosively, not dramatically, but as though a hidden door had been unlocked. A rectangular section of floor dropped inward, and Bishop Ignacio Alvarez vanished into darkness. The opening closed immediately after. The marble pieces slid back into place with unnatural precision. The crack remained visible, but the floor was solid. Father Herrera fell to his knees, striking the stone with his hands. It was unyielding. The knocking stopped. Complete silence filled the cathedral. Within minutes, authorities were called. The Mass was abandoned. Parishioners were evacuated in shock and confusion. Police arrived. Engineers inspected the sanctuary floor. No hollow cavity was found. Ground-penetrating equipment showed only dense foundation stone.
There was no shaft.
No tunnel. No mechanism. No trace of Bishop Alvarez. Yet dozens of witnesses had seen him fall. In the days that followed, official statements described the event as a structural anomaly combined with mass panic. Some suggested collective misperception. But Father Herrera refused that explanation. 3 days after Christmas, he requested private access to the cathedral at night. He claimed something unfinished remained. Reluctantly, the diocese agreed. At 11:55 p.m. on December 28th, Father Herrera stood alone before the repaired altar, holding a crucifix and a small vial of holy water. The cathedral was empty. The air was still. He began to pray. At midnight, the first knock sounded beneath his feet. And this time it did not stop. The knocking did not echo. It vibrated. Father Tomas Herrera later described it as a pulse rather than a sound, a steady impact rising from deep beneath the foundation. Each strike traveled through the stone and into his bones. He did not step back. He continued praying. The cathedral lights were dimmed, leaving only the sanctuary lamps glowing faintly above the altar. The crack in the marble, repaired after Christmas Eve, was still faintly visible like a scar across pale skin. The second knock came harder. Dust drifted from the vaulted ceiling. Herrera pressed the crucifix against the altar surface. "In the name of Christ, you will answer." The temperature dropped so sharply that his breath became visible. According to his later written statement, he felt an overwhelming sense of intrusion, not into the building, but into his own thoughts. A pressure behind the eyes. A heaviness in the chest. The
No,
knocking
please,
shifted.
no!
No longer
coming
directly
closer.
beneath the altar.
It's getting at
It
me!
moved. One impact near the left transept, another near the nave, a third near the sanctuary steps. As if something below was circling, Herrera began reciting the litany of the saints. His voice wavered
veil
once,
thins.
then steadied.
Ascend
The sound
now,
beneath him
and bear
changed
witness.
again. This time, it was
Father,
accompanied
forgive
by
me,
a
for
low
I have
scraping,
sinned.
like
The
stone
darkness
dragged
consumes me.
slowly across stone.
I cannot bear it.
Then came a voice. Not loud, not disembodied in the dramatic sense. It was layered within the sound of grinding rock, as though speech was forming through friction. A single phrase in Latin, "Red quod nostrum est," return what is ours. Herrera stopped breathing. He later testified that the voice did not enter through his ears. It seemed to emerge inside his own mind,
These words hold the
heavy
key.
and cold.
The
He
flame
answered
reveals
aloud,
the truth.
though his throat felt constricted. "There is nothing here that belongs to you." The response came instantly. 3 violent knocks. The altar candles burst back into flames simultaneously. The repaired crack in the marble began to widen again. Herrera stepped back, sprinkling holy water across the altar surface. The droplets hissed as they touched the stone, evaporating into faint streams of vapor. The grinding intensified. The marble slab trembled. And then, slowly, a thin line appeared along the floor, precisely where Bishop Alvarez had vanished days earlier. It did not break open. It traced itself, a perfect rectangle forming in pale dust. Herrera realized something with sudden clarity. The floor had not collapsed on Christmas Eve. It had opened. Intentionally. He knelt and pressed his ear against the stone despite every instinct telling him not to. Beneath it, he heard breathing. Slow. Measured. Human. He recoiled as the voice returned, clearer now. Pulsatio apparet. The knocking opens. Herrera began the rite of major exorcism, though no person stood before him. He directed the prayers toward the unseen presence beneath the altar. The atmosphere shifted violently. The cathedral doors slammed shut at the far end of the nave. The chandeliers swayed though no wind entered. The knocking ceased abruptly. Silence fell. Then a new sound emerged. Footsteps. Not above, below. Walking slowly under the foundation of the sanctuary. One step.
Pause.
Another step.
Pause.
Circling directly beneath him. Herrera's voice grew louder, more urgent. He invoked the authority of the church, the sanctity of the altar, the protection of heaven. The footsteps stopped. The floor became still. For a moment, there was nothing. Then the marble rectangle dropped open. This time it did not reseal. Darkness yawned beneath the altar like a wound. A narrow stone staircase descended into blackness that should not have existed according to any architectural plan. Cold air poured upward, carrying the unmistakable scent of soil and decay. Herrera stood frozen. He later wrote that at that moment he understood the bishop had not been taken randomly. He had answered something. Herrera raised his crucifix and began descending. Each step creaked softly, though carved from stone. The walls were rough and ancient, far older than the cathedral itself. Moisture clung to the surfaces. The air grew heavier with each step downward. After what felt like dozens of steps, he reached a small chamber. The room was circular, its ceiling arched low, supported by crude pillars. At the center stood a stone table, dark and worn smooth by time. Around the walls were niches, empty, except for faint markings etched into the stone. Symbols. Not decorative. Not artistic. Deliberate. Herrera recognized fragments of Latin inscriptions twisted into unnatural forms. He could not place their origin. They were not liturgical. They were not classical. At the far side of the chamber lay Bishop Alvarez. He was kneeling.
Alive.
His eyes were open but unfocused. His hands were bound not by rope, but by something unseen, held tight against his chest as if restrained by invisible pressure. Herrera rushed forward. Ignacio. The bishop's eyes shifted slowly toward him. His lips parted. They remembered. Alvarez whispered. Herrera grabbed his shoulders, attempting to pull him to his feet. The bishop did not resist, but he did not move. It was as if the air itself pinned him in place. The temperature in the chamber dropped further. The voice returned, no longer inside Herrera's mind, but resonating faintly through the walls. He opened. Herrera understood. The knocking had not been an attack. It had been an invitation. He began the exorcism prayers again, directing them not only at the presence in the chamber, but at the space itself. The symbols along the walls began to darken, as though seeping moisture. The bishop gasped sharply. His body convulsed once. The stone table at the center of the room cracked down the middle. The voice grew louder. Return. Herrera pressed the crucifix against the bishop's forehead. In the name of Christ, release him. A violent force threw Herrera backward across the chamber. He struck the wall, the crucifix clattering from his hand. The unseen pressure around the bishop intensified. His ribs strained visibly against his vestments. Herrera crawled forward, reaching for the crucifix. The chamber trembled. Dust rained from the ceiling. The staircase behind them began to crumble, stones falling one by one. The voice shifted tone, no longer commanding, accusing. He consecrated what was sealed. Herrera's mind raced. The renovations, the uncovered corridors, the resealed crypts. Something had been disturbed beneath the altar years ago. Something ancient had been confined below the original foundation. By consecrating the restored sanctuary after renovations, Alvarez may have unintentionally reopened what had been bound. The knocking, a signal, not to frighten, to summon. The bishop's eyes suddenly focused sharply. "Close it," he whispered. Herrera grabbed the crucifix and stood at the center of the chamber. He began a final prayer of sealing, invoking protection not over a person but over a place. His voice rose above the trembling stone. The symbols along the walls began to crack. A deafening roar filled the chamber, not from any visible source, but from every surface at once. The bishop screamed. The invisible restraint snapped. Herrera lunged forward and pulled him to his feet. Together they staggered toward the staircase. Behind them, the stone table shattered completely. A shockwave of cold air surged through the chamber. They climbed as the steps collapsed beneath their feet. Herrera pushed the bishop upward through the opening in the sanctuary floor just as the staircase gave way entirely. The marble rectangle slammed shut behind them with crushing force. Silence returned. Both men lay on the sanctuary floor, gasping. The crack in the altar remained, but no opening followed. Church officials later documented that Bishop Alvarez survived the descent. But he did not resume his duties. In the weeks that followed, he spoke, very little. He insisted the cathedral be closed indefinitely. He ordered a permanent sealing of the sanctuary floor with reinforced stone and iron. He resigned in February of 1988. Officially, his departure was attributed to declining health. Unofficially, clergy whispered that he never slept again. According to Father Herrera's final written account, Bishop Alvarez confessed one detail before retreating from public life. On the night of the renovations years earlier, when the ancient corridor was discovered beneath the altar, Alvarez had descended briefly to inspect it. In the darkness, he had heard 3 knocks. He had not reported them. Instead, he had ordered the corridor sealed and the sanctuary reconsecrated. He believed the ritual would silence whatever lingered below. It had not. On Christmas Eve 1987, when the knocking returned, he understood the pattern had completed. He did not fall by accident. He stepped forward to answer. The Cathedral of Santa Lucia reopened quietly years later. Tour guides never mention the sealed foundation beneath the altar. The marble bears no visible scar now. But according to maintenance records obtained decades afterward, workers occasionally report unexplained vibrations beneath the sanctuary during late-night hours. Always 3 knocks. Never more. Never less.
And always at midnight.